class. Today we are going to talk about 8.3, which is special right triangles. And chapter 8 is all about right triangles. That's what the whole chapter is about. But we have some specific triangles that we're going to be talking about here for 8.3. Our objectives today is at the end of this video, you should be able to use the properties of 45, 45, 90 triangles and use the properties of 30, 60, 90 triangles. So ask yourself, what do you think that the 45, 45, 90 and the 30, 60, 90 represent? Yep, that's right. These are angles. And so when we have triangles and they have those angle measurements, then we are able to use these special rules we're going to get today. All right, so right off the bat, it says use Pythagorean theorem to find the sides of the squares. Just for time's sake, normally I'd go through and I'd do a big long explanation and work these things through. But if we take our square and we put a diagonal in there, we're taking our 90-degree angle and we're splitting it in half. So that's going to create our 45 degrees and our 45 degrees and then our 90 degrees. We have our two legs, and you'll notice in our 45, 45, 90 that these two legs are congruent. So you're going to want to keep that in mind when we get here to our next part. We're going to give you some rules. So in our triangle, in our 45, 45, 90, if given the legs, so that's saying that I'm going to give you that leg value, whether it's 2 or whether it's 18 times the square root of 27. We're going to get that leg value. And to find the hypotenuse, we would multiply the leg by the square root of 2. Then, let's say that you're given the hypotenuse instead. So this time, instead of having your leg, you have your hypotenuse. And I want to know the length of the legs. So if we're given the hypotenuse to find the length of the legs, we are going to divide the hypotenuse by square root of 2. Now you'll notice when we're dealing with 45, 45, 90s, both times that we use our rules, it's dealing with our square roots of 2. That's going to make a difference when we get to our 30, 60, 90s. So let's put this in with some actual math that's going to help make this make sense. All right, so here's the thing I always tell my classes. When you're doing 45, 45, 90s or 30, 60, 90s, there's two questions to ask yourself. What am I given? And what am I looking for? So here in our first problem, we have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and we know that because these legs are congruent. So isosceles 45, 45, 90. We are given the hypotenuse. 12 is the hypotenuse, and we are looking for the legs. So flip back, look at your notes. If given the hypotenuse to find the legs, so we're going to be using this rule right here. Divide the hypotenuse by square root of 12, or square root of 2. So we're going to take 12 and divide it by square root of 2. It's an okay answer, but I really, really don't like it. So why don't I like it? Well, there's that square root in the bottom. We can't have that square root in the bottom. So the way that we're going to get rid of that is by timesing it by square root of 2. If we do it to the bottom, we need to do it to the top. This brings back some of those rules about radicals. Looking at our numerator, the top of the fraction, 12 times square root of 2. Can we multiply the 12 and the 2? Well, no. The 12 is outside the square root and the 2 is inside, so it's going to stay that way. But when we get to our denominator, our 2's we can multiply because they're both under square roots. So that's going to get a square root of 4. Now remember, I multiplied those to get 4. I didn't add those to get 4. Square root of 4 we can certainly simplify. So we have 12 square root of 2 over 2. Now, a much better answer than the first answer we got, but we can still go further and simplify right here. Again, it's that whole thing about the radicals. We can simplify the 12 and 2 here because they're both not under radicals. We can't do it with the square root because that 2 is still under there. So our leg is 6 square root of 2. All right, let's look at the next one. 2b. So 2b, we're going to ask ourselves those two questions. What are we given? Well, we're given a leg, and what are we finding? We're finding the hypotenuse. Look up to that box on your note sheet. If given the legs to find the hypotenuse, multiply the leg by square root of 2. So our leg is 4. We're going to times it by square root of 2, and there's no simplifying we need to do there, so that's our solution. So sometimes these are pretty easy rules to follow. Now, let's just touch base and talk about what we're given here is an exact answer. So I could say x equals 4 times the square root of 2. because it's that square root. If we wanted to have a decimal, we would have an approximation. So therefore, we would take 4 times the actual square root of 2, and we would end up with 5.7. Now in my class, I'm going to ask you guys to leave it in that square root answer. Okay, I'm going to have you guys do C on your own, but just remember to ask yourself, what am I given? What am I looking for? All right, to the back side here, if we look at the equilateral triangle, all the angles are 60 degrees. But if I split it, now I've created a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Actually, we've created 2. And we have our short leg here, we have a long leg, and we have our hypotenuse. All right, so let's go ahead. See that here? Again, let me show you. Short, long, and our hypotenuse. Notice how in our triangle, they only named the 30 and the 90 degree angle because we know that all the triangles add up to 180, so it's assumed that that other angle is going to be 60 degrees. All right, we've got a few more rules here than we did on 45, 45, 90s because we've got a few more combinations we could have. 2 of these are going to have 2 steps. All right, and it just so happens that our first one's going to have 2 steps. So if we're given the hypotenuse, to find the long leg, we are going to first divide the hypotenuse by 2. And this is just by a plain old 2, not by square root of 2. Remember, square roots of 2 are for the 45, 45, 90. All right, step 2. Once we've divided the hypotenuse by 2, we are going to multiply by square root of 3. So that's a 2-stepper. All right, next one. If given the short leg, to find the hypotenuse, here we're going to multiply by square root of 2. Or, sorry, excuse me. Remember, square roots of 2 is just for the front side. Multiply by just plain old 2. All right. Remember, if I'm going too fast for you, please, please, please pause, rewind, watch it again. All right, if we're given the short leg, to find the long leg, you are going to multiply that long leg by square root of 3. All right, so now let's go up to this next one. Now we're going to work backwards. Here, if we're given the long leg, to find the short leg, we're going to do the opposite of what we were just doing. We're going to divide by square root of 3. Notice how here I'm going from the long leg to the short leg. And here I was going from the short leg to the long leg. And we just did the opposite. So next one is going to be our other 2-stepper, because if we're going from the long leg to the hypotenuse, we're going to look back up here and go from the hypotenuse to the long leg. So our first step is we're going to divide by square root of 3. The second step will be to multiply by 2. So pretty basic steps to follow along with. And our last one, if we're given the hypotenuse to find the short leg, we are going to divide by 2. All right, make sure you get all those rules down. And we're going to go ahead and take a look here at our next problem. All right, again, we're going to go back to those same 2 questions. What are we given? What are we looking for? Well, if we look here in this problem for 4A, we are given the long leg. We want the short leg, and we want the hypotenuse. So I always recommend to my students, go back and look. If given the long leg, to find the hypotenuse, we have this rule. And if given the long leg, to find the short leg, we have that rule. Well, I really like doing the least amount of work as we have to. And so let's go ahead and find the short leg first, because it's only 1 step. All right, so to find the short leg, we take the long leg, and we divide it by the square root of 3. Ooh, again, yuck, that square root of 3 is in the bottom and we don't want that there. So go ahead and times the top and the bottom by square root of 3. Remember, the 12 and the 3 are both not underneath square roots, so we can't multiply them. And on the bottom, we're going to get square root of 9. That's going to simplify for us to 3. And simplifying one last step, we get 4 square root of 3 is equal to our short leg, x. I'm going to go ahead and just jot that up here next to their short leg. Now I'm going to ask you again, what are we given? What are we looking for? Well, we're given the short leg and the long leg this time. So look back at your rules. We want to find the hypotenuse. We can either use this rule with 2 steps, or we can use this rule with 1 step. So if we have the short leg and we want to find the hypotenuse, we're going to multiply it by 2. Well, that's easy enough. 4 square root of 3 times 2. Do I take that 2 and times it by the 4, the 3, or both of them? Well, we're going to times it just by the 4. Again, it's that radical rule because of the square root. So we get 8 square root of 3 equals y. All right, here we go. We have our problem B. What are we given? We're given our hypotenuse. We want our short leg and our long leg. So if given the hypotenuse, it looks like it's easier to find our short leg right off. So if given the hypotenuse to find the short leg, the rule says divide by 2. Well, x equals 10 divided by 2. So our short leg is 5. All right, now we're given our short leg and our hypotenuse, and it's going to be easier for us to use the short leg to find the long leg. So take the short leg and multiply it by the square root of 3, and we get 5 square root of 3 for our long leg. So not a lot of work for that one. Go ahead and look at C. Notice C is 2 separate triangles. And if I ask you what's going to be easier to find first, X or Y? X is going to be easier to find because we have our triangle here, and we know our hypotenuse. In our small triangle, we don't know anything yet. If you go ahead and find your long leg with using our hypotenuse, and we can find that long leg, then we'll find X. But we still don't have enough information to help us find Y. Well, go ahead and you need to find this short leg in our large triangle because that's going to be the long leg in the small triangle. So sometimes we don't ask you specifically to find something, but you need to find it to be able to get any more of your answer. All right, guys, hope that helped. We'll see you tomorrow.